Are there any other examples? I mean, we went over the JFK assassination. Are there any other examples where this kind of jurisdictional issue that they've created has, led to cover-ups, controversies, conspiracies?
Yeah, so they have assassinated many of our presidents. So Lincoln was assassinated by John Wilkes Booth, but John Wilkes Booth was recruited, trained, hired, paid by agents of the British Empire named George Sanders and John Surratt. One of them worked for the Hudson Bay Company, which is like the East India Company of Canada. And the other one worked for the London-based Confederate Secret Service, right? So the Confederacy altogether was this empire strategy of, if your colonies are getting out of hand, I call it chopped and screwed. You cause wars, civil wars, and you chop them into smaller pieces. So this happens this very day, right? Sudan, I think the guy in 2011, his name was Omar al-Bashir, and he wasn't playing ball with what we wanted to do. So they went and they stood up this civil war, this insurrection in the South, ran by this maniac named, his last name was Kier, wore a cowboy hat. And they took all of the oil-rich section of Sudan and broke that off into South Sudan. So they do this in Africa all the time. They try to do it in the United States. But Lincoln, being like, he was, he wasn't completely perfect. He did some things that maybe were bad precedents down the road in certain cases. But in this case of bringing the South back in as if they had never left, that was the right choice, because it would have been an empire victory otherwise. Later on, there's a guy, President Garfield. He was assassinated by a guy who was part of one of those weird, exotic experiment sex cults. And they said it was because he was disgruntled about some things, but he was an agent of the British Empire too. Later on, William McKinley was trying to essentially usurp or trying to degrade the British power over trade, right? They owned the oceans. They owned all the choke points. Suez Canal, Gibraltar, throughout the Caribbean, all of the key places. If you wanted to do business in the sea, which was how most of the trade had to go by the day, you had to go through the British and you had to pay them their cut and you had to follow their rules. So McKinley was trying to create this railroad system. He was working with the Russians. He was working with the Germans. He was working with some other people. And they wanted to create this railway system that would go through the Bering Strait and all the way to the southern tip of South America. So you could get from Western Europe to South America by rail. And that would have dramatically degraded this maritime power of the British Empire. He was also trying to do a gold standard. He was interfering with some of their empire building activities in South America. And so they sent this anarchist, quote unquote, to kill him. But that anarchist was a British asset. That anarchist was a part of this thing called the Emma Goldman Anarchist Networks. And over the years, they assassinated 6 monarchs, 3 prime ministers, a few presidents, right, all across the world. And that was these New York-based British banking oligarchs, right, like the Schiffs, the Warburgs, funding these criminal proxies. And then those criminal proxies being used as the people that were actually killing people. So back in the day, obviously, the forensics weren't as great. And, things were a lot more hardcore. So if you did figure it out, it was a lot easier to just come off you than it is now. But I think that precedent, right, of every president who's tried to get us out of this, or every president who's caused problems for the British Empire's designs, ends up dead as a doornail.